on paper, like strategic planning wise, most churches, that just feels like a straight loss. And I'll be honest, at times it felt like a loss to Mosaic. Like there's less people in this gathering because that whole 2 rows just went with Trav to plant roots.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Jesus in the Upper Left podcast. I'm Pete Armstrong, pastor of Park Lane Church here in East Portland, and I'm excited to have Tim Osborn with me today. He is a longtime pastor and leader in the Portland area, and he's currently serving at Western Seminary. We've also got Gabe Kolstad. Why don't you say hi, Gabe?
Good to see everybody. I'm from Westside Community Church in Beaverton and part of Multiply PDX, so excited to be here too, and great to see you again, Tim.
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys.
Yeah. So tell us about your journey a little bit, just in life and faith and vocation. You've been in Portland a long time, and we're kind of all about that with Jesus in the Upper Left. So share with us about your journey.
Great. Yeah, I've been in Portland since 2007, so 17 years. Before that, I was born and raised in Los Angeles area, California, Long Beach specifically, which is a fantastic place to be from. No, it's Long Beach, LA's. I loved growing up there, but cannot imagine being there still. So God has made us Portlanders in the best sense, and we love that. Yeah, grew up in a great, really. My mom and dad came to faith as adults, young adults, and got married. And I, in my teen years, realized I was one of all my friends that had parents that still loved each other and still loved Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And so just a great gift to me and my sister growing up, of who my parents are. My dad just passed away. And so my mom still loves him, but he's no longer here. So, but just great parents, great church. I literally was in the same church from birth until I served there as a young adult and left when I was 24, almost 25.
Wow.
But
great foundation.
Oh, it was so good. Such a great church, and still is a really good church. And but had no idea I'd be in ministry, no interest in ministry, and ended up out at Champaign. How do you say it? Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, at a missions conference that I didn't know was a missions conference. And God really woke me up. I had been walking with Jesus seriously for the first year and a half of college, and which is a whole nother story, but ended up out at this conference and had a surrender moment with Jesus where I just went, I had made a deal with God that he had not signed off on, but I had said, I will follow you and do anything as long as it's not being a missionary, church planter, or pastor. And so, anyways, if you haven't tried that, try that with God, see how that works out. But, I had a really, life-changing surrender moment there.
Was there a specific speaker or like a moment or a worship time or something?
Well,
the Holy Spirit's been moving at that conference for decades.
Oh my gosh, the stories that come out of my mom knew about it, and had told me about it. I had seen college students going to it as I was growing up.
Went for a few years,
it's crazy. And I was like, I just want to get away and go have fun at a college conference. And I'm in line looking at all the paperwork and going, what? This is a mission? You've got to be kidding. And I grew up in a Baptist church in the hallways where all the places the missionaries were going. Yarn that's all these different places, and just was like, that's not. And we had missionaries through our
I love that.
Our home growing up. Like my mom would have and I was like, people are weird. Like, glad they love Jesus and live in Africa, but I
do not want to have breakfast with them anymore.
No. I was not on board with that at all. And then I'm at this missions conference, and it's weird, obviously the way his life ended is super controversial, but Ravi Zacharias just was amazing.
Yeah.
Not just what he communicated, which was most important, but even just how he communicated. And so as a young college student that was really, I loved Jesus and was growing, but what he challenged us with, and that was early in the conference, and then it was the final hour of the conference, which if you don't know anything about it, it ends at midnight as the year changes. So December 31st, going into January 1.
What year was that?
93. 93 into 94.
Yeah.
And so you're counting down the year, worship and communion with 17,000 college students. And I couldn't take communion until I surrendered that. And it was the weirdest thing. And I went, like, maybe 80% of the reason I went was because my girlfriend was going, who is now my wife. And she was standing next to me and had no idea what was going on, But I just had this moment where I couldn't take the elements unless I said, okay, and I knew what it meant. And I knew I had to go back to college, start taking more Bible classes, and was going to be in ministry, but I didn't know what that meant. I would go to seminary. I knew that. And it's this completely anticlimactic experience because you walk out into the freezing snow and get on a bus and start traveling back home for me, So it's like, but wait, my life just shifted and I'm cold.
And how amazing that's been 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What a journey.
True. Yeah.
I mean, that's just wild.
It is.
Yeah.
So I went back and I went as a student at Azusa Pacific and then started right away after graduating, started at Talbot School of Theology at Biola. Loved that experience, and also started as a college director at my church. And I knew, like, I love the local church. I love reaching college students, trying to disciple them. And so those were early formative years. Went to 3 years of that, and then went to Pasadena and started a church called Lake Avenue Church, right across the street from Fuller Seminary, if you know that. Yep. And that was an opportunity I was no way qualified for. Came in as an interim and thought, I remember sitting, this is a larger church, and I was sitting in one of the first staff meetings, and they would give an update on their pastoral searches, and there was 9 pastoral searches going on.
Whoa.
And I was like, this is like, I shouldn't be in this room. Like, what am I doing? Staff team of 40 or 50. And, but got an opportunity to lead college and young adults, and a temporary interim role turned into 8.5 years.
Wow.
And ended up eventually overseeing all of adult ministries, which was a great opportunity. And so just formative ministry experience. During that time, a pastor at the church I grew up in, I reconnected with, and he started mentoring me. And his name is Paul Rhodes, who tons of pastors and leaders in Portland know Paul.
Yeah.
But Paul had moved from Long Beach to Vancouver to take a role with Church Resource Ministries, CRM, now Nova. I think it's Nova now. Is that right?
All these name changes. Yeah, I still don't know what a CRM. But great organization.
Great organization. So he was in Vancouver. I was in Pasadena. I was mentoring me, and knew God was winding down my ministry at Lake Avenue, but had no idea what was next, and never gone through a transition like this before, and had 3 young boys. And I came up and interviewed at a church on the west side of Portland. And we had this what we said at the time, we have
Don't go there. Do not go there. Don't go to the west side, no matter.
Hey, come on over, man.
we would have gotten to know each other a lot sooner.
We probably would have
landed there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But Abby and I just had this vague sense of call to the Pacific Northwest, and just knew that it was an unchurched region.
Yeah.
And LA is fantastic, but it actually is churched. And so in a lot of ways, now obviously there's tons of need, but in terms of church culture, it's a very church culture.
A little different, right? There's sort of a backdrop of spirituality or church spirituality.
Well, and the example that I share is getting a haircut in Portland was so different than getting a haircut in LA. And so
describe that.
So I would sit down and eventually, you kind of go as long as you can until it comes out like, so what do you do? I'm a pastor. In LA, the response was always, there was this deferential, there's clarity. Like, okay, do I still call you Tim, or do I call you father or priest or pastor? And I was like, well, actually in my role, what I'm referred to as Tim. So let's stick with that. But there was this like respect and this, even if they didn't believe anything, like they still, I get to Portland and that question comes up and I say, I'm a pastor on the street here. And they're like, okay. And it was like, I could have told him I was a plumber, a CEO, a landscaper, or a pastor, and the response would have been utterly the same. And if anything, it actually decreased engagement in conversation. And so,
just people not wanting to go there, or
well, and absolutely no, hey, dude, thanks for being a pastor, or hey, what's that like? No, it was like, oh, that's
too bad.
That's weird.
Like,
or maybe does that have something to do with animals or something? Like there's just was no engagement. Like, and so that was the difference. But we had this vague sense of call to the Northwest. And we come and interview at this church on the West Side and think everything is going fine. And then we experience the worship service and they're like, nope, can't do that. I'm 32, 33. I'm like, I can't lead through changing that. Like that is not my. Meet Paul and his wife Becky downtown, and they're just all excited because we might come to Portland. So how's it going? And I said, man, we are really discouraged because we love the little bit we've tasted and experienced of Portland, but we're not going there like that. We can't do that. And then he looks over at me and he says, well, what kind of church do you want to be a part of? And at that point, I was like probably close to burnout and knew I needed to transition out of Pasadena. And I basically, all I said was like, no, I didn't have any grand vision or even maybe passion. I just said a church that is open to change, to do whatever is needed to reach the people that it's planted around. And he goes, okay, well, what if you were a part of a church that was like this and like this? And I just was like, yes, that sounds great. And I knew he was starting to talk about the church that he was a part of. And then he says, well, hey, our church that we just helped plant, that's about 3.5 years old, is just starting to look for a new lead pastor.
Which is a hard time to look for a new pastor in the life cycle of a church.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that at the time, but I learned that, right? Like,
yeah.
And so anyways, he says that, and his Becky hits him on the knee and says, that's so inappropriate. They're here talking to another church. And he looks at her and goes, yes. And then whispers, I'll call you this week. And that started about a 6-month process that ended up us Labor Day weekend of 2007 moving to Portland to take over the lead role at Mosaic. And Mosaic was just turning 4 years old. It had been planted by 2 pastors, both from Vancouver, oddly enough. But one was a guy named Randy Shaw, was coming from a church called East Park Community Church on the outer east side of Vancouver. And Chris Coulter was a college and adult pastor at New Heights. And the pastor at New Heights at the time, Matt Hannon, had started something called Northwest Church Planting and was just trying to network planters in Portland, Vancouver, and put these 2 guys together and said, you guys would be a good team. And they wanted to plant in inner Portland. And so they had planted Mosaic in the east side, inner east, urban core of Portland. And Chris had moved to Northern California after about 2 years. And Randy was a kind of an entrepreneurial, that kind of apostolic kind of planter. And he was ready to step out of the lead role. And so I was stepping in, and that got us to Portland.
I'm curious what you noticed first, in terms of either the shock or the like, okay, this is the challenge here, or like how long did it take you jumping into that role to see some of those things? So
probably two separate topics in that. One is within the church, and then one is within the context and the culture of Portland. We loved it immediately coming to Portland. And
your kids and everyone.
It was as soon as it started raining, the kids started asking questions. But
is this going to keep going?
I really thought I had I think probably as a typical, if you've only ever lived in Southern California, I definitely had like this ignorant arrogance of why would any human live somewhere else other than Southern California?
Like I still ask myself that question, actually.
and now I know better. Like I'm like, this is the promised land, man. We come here and it's like, it's light. When we move, it's like light till 9:30 at night, and it's perfect weather, and everything is green. And from where our house is, we could drive 20 minutes east, and we're standing at Multnomah Falls. We're looking over the Columbia River. Like we're walking around downtown where there's a river. It just is like blowing our minds, and we're loving it. And then culturally, leaving LA where everything is how you appear. To Portland, where it was like, and we got on pretty quickly, like, oh, we get it. Like, the whole hipster thing was just starting, and it was like, you appear like you don't care what you look like at all, but you have taken hours and intentionality to look like you've not showered and that you've picked up clothes out of the trash can and refused to trim your facial hair. Like, but there's an appearance concern, but we just loved the casual. We don't have to like look right and dress right and all of that. And then there was just this sounds weird to say, but our experience coming from LA was we could come into Portland and people would interact with you.
Yeah.
And so, now that doesn't look like it on facial expression. So we would walk by people and there's like no eye contact, looking down. But if I said, hey, can you help me with directions? In Portland, people go, oh yeah, bro, where are you headed? Like, what do you need? And maybe I'll even walk you there. But in LA, it's smile and eye contact and a head nod. But then you're like, hey, can I have directions? And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, stop. No, get away from me. So it was a very different culture.
Yeah.
Now, obviously deeply embedded within the history and the DNA and the culture of Portland is these huge hurdles to get into deep, personal, honest relationship, to talk about spirituality, to engage with the need for a savior. Like all those kinds of things were really, really challenging. Not to mention what kind of circles all of that is just the values are so different. And so the challenge immediately was the value system was so different. And then inside the church, the challenge was certainly taking over from a planting pastor. And the plan was that he would stay on.
Oh.
So, we said openly like, hey, every consultant or coach would recommend against this, but we think it's worthwhile to continue to partner with the founding pastor. So again, 4 years old, church is booming, thriving, like 700 plus people. I think there was 3 gatherings at that point. They had already planted one church, had an embedded planter to plant again.
Was it in the location that it's still in today? Great, yeah.
Young staff team. And then Randy was going to stay on staff in a real part-time role as he helped coach planters outside of that for denomination and that kind of thing. His wife was on staff. But the challenge was I came in and I went, well, two big challenges. One, planting. I was at a large church where planting was kind of like an unspoken, you don't say that word. It was like a cuss word. Like you don't say, this is add and build and grow and big. And so planting is sending, releasing, going away. And so I knew nothing about planting. I didn't have a vision for it, didn't have experience. I knew it was completely foreign to, and I told that going in, like, the vision for this church is to be a planting church. I've not done that. I don't know how to do that. So hopefully God's leading this because, but that leads to the second kind of challenge was, what I did bring was what Mosaic needed at the time was just development. And so it started with great vision and need. I mean, really, one of the things I learned at the time, it planted in 2003 and I came in 2007. And at that time, I think Imago was the only really thriving church in the inner east side of Portland. And so Mosaic had kind of followed on that path about 4 years, I think, 4 years younger than Imago. And so it was young. There wasn't a lot of other churches around, but what it needed was kind of inner development and direction of how to be a church after kind of exploding early and with a great vision and people and culture and all of that.
Structure.
That was, there was, so I brought that from a larger church. I'd only been in larger churches in my life. And so it went I'm on my way, everything's set and done and approved, and I've been called, and we're on our way moving. And I emailed one of the guys on staff and said, "Okay, I'm coming. Start sending me everything. Send me strategic plan, vision documents, any kind of, I don't know, policies, role descriptions. I looked it up the other day.
He's like, we don't got them.
We don't have anything. He says, I looked around, I asked, here's what I found. And he literally sent me a 1/4 page of a document about a vacation policy. And he's like, and we just started this because somebody is, I don't know, having a baby or something. Like it was, and I was like, so I just put it out of my mind. I said, forget it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to pack up my house, get settled in my house, and I'll just figure it out when I get there.
Were you intimidated to be, because that was also like your first time as a lead pastor, right?
Oh, and I had to learn how to be a lead pastor.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I think one of the things that allowed it to work, first of all, I was not aspiring to be a lead pastor. I was actually more like, I want to go to a church that will pay me a salary, and I'll teach. And I want to be a like second, third chair teaching pastor. And Paul was gracious with my young self and just saying, he knew, I think I was like a little embittered at some of the things that gone on in the large church, and just kind of walked with me and asked me soul care questions, and kind of helped me rebound and heal and uncover the passion that I had for the local church that had kind of been diminished, I think, over a few years. And so I didn't care what role I was in. This is how I'm gifted. This is how I'm wired. This is what I have to offer. And so here this church is saying, we want you to come and be the lead. And I didn't care about the chair I was in. I cared about the vision and the need and the place. And
that's fantastic.
And so I come in, but I'm also wired like, if you hand something to me, I'm going to take it. And so, and I just,
wouldn't you rather like call someone like that to your church, though, Gabe?
Yeah, because the ego isn't there, right? And that, I think, is, looking at what we haven't known each other for a long time, but a few years now, and I just feel like that's a real characteristic that you have, is a humble confidence, and bringing in somebody who was gunning for a position, that'd be a very short-lived thing, probably. But awesome the impact you've had.
Well, and I think, I'm sure my parents and some early mentors and leaders, but Paul as well, were really helpful in like, and I think I had humility was a big value for me early on, and like and because I've always been in the church, I've seen plenty of leaders do it how I didn't want to do it, and so that ego part has always just been on my radar, and so when it starts to boil up, I really try to hold it before Jesus and say, hey, I don't want to go that way. I don't want to make this about me. And I did walk into a context where I had, Paul had helped plant the church and was on the board. Randy was the lead that was staying around, and he was 10 years older than me. And then they had just hired a teaching pastor, who I think you guys know, but Morris Dirks, who now led Soul Formation before handing it off. And so he was coming to Portland to be a teaching pastor, real part-time, quarter-time, but he was 20 years older than me. And so I step into this context with these leaders around me that when I did kind of get out of line, they were gracious to go, nope, step back, And I just felt spoiled that I've got these men that I can look to. And the church sees that as well. And so I can come in as a younger guy, learn how to be a lead pastor, but have trusted leaders around me as well. And I think there is a part of my wiring too, where it's like, I loved the challenge and wasn't intimidated by it and wasn't bothered. And so like, Randy stayed on staff for about a year and a half. And
that was going to be my next question.
How that went.
Because it is. It's really hard.
It is. And I'm glad that I was ignorant and didn't know how hard it was, because I don't know that I would have signed up for it. And again, part of my wiring is like, I came in and I'm like, if you're silly, I'm gonna call it out. And I don't care if you're 10 years younger than me or 10 years older than me.
Yeah.
And so, and then part of Randy's journey was, him that's hard to let go of something.
Yeah.
And so,
It's your baby, yeah.
But within the first month, we had a knockdown, drag out in a staff meeting, the lead team, the four of us, Randy and I and two other guys.
Which can be a really good thing.
Well, I learned after the fact it was really good because it was like, he was just saying, I'm sure I've been wrong on things too, but this one he was just blatantly wrong on. I was like, dude, you can't do that. This is not where this comes from. We want to do all of that. And the other two guys were like, after the fact, they told me like, oh, no one's ever done that with him before.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, good to know. And that's how this is going to go now. And so, and Randy and I stayed friends for a long time. And so he stayed on for about a year, year and a half. And then, and he's an entrepreneur, kind of mover shaker.
Yeah.
So he eventually needed to go do his own thing, but they stayed a part of the church for a very long time.
I had a similar experience here where my predecessor was here for 27 years. And so that, he basically planted the church. I mean, transitioned it from more of an ethnic church to like a neighborhood church and did an amazing job. But they went away for maybe 2 years. Served other places, and then they've been back the last 5. And that's been really wonderful. Yeah. But I think it was because there was some space and distance and allowed me to kind of get settled here a little bit. Yeah. And then even like through COVID, kind of really get to know people and like show them that I'm here for the long haul and that. But it's those transitions are really tough, whether it's plant or more of established church or, and a lot of denominations and churches even have like policies around that,
When again, coming in as a young leader, I was like, policy's small.
Yeah.
And now I look back and I go, oh, okay. Like there's wisdom to that, right? Like, and maybe you wouldn't do it exactly the same as some churches or denominations do it, but there's wisdom within that. And I mean, I led for almost 17 years at Mosaic and I couldn't have stayed. Like I needed to step away as much as there's long-term friendships and relationships that continue, but I needed to not be present. And
has it been a year since you stepped away?
Oh, no. It's been like 3-4 months.
3-4 months. Okay. Yeah. And how are you? I mean, this is just, I'm curious. What are you and your wife doing on Sunday mornings?
Well, on Sunday mornings, we've been sleeping in because we picked a church that meets at 4 p.m. So,
there you go.
So,
that was strategic.
I wish it was more strategic. It worked. It was more lazy and convenient. And then I was like, oh, this works out really good. We like this.
That's cool.
Yeah. But actually, that's a fun piece to share too, is that right in our neighborhood is a church that Mosaic planted about 12 years ago. And good friends. So, on this podcast, we've interviewed Travis Weiss, who leads Roots Community, which is in the Park Rose neighborhood, Gateway Park Rose. And so that's where we've kind of landed for this season.
Travis is a great guy.
I can hit that church with a baseball from my
from your house, right?
Yeah.
And I disagree. Travis is a horrible person, and we're there helping him. No,
trying to reform him a little bit.
Yeah, no, Travis is a hoot, man. He's But that does So one of the things that I had to learn at Mosaic was planting. And so I had to come in, and I kind of had to fake it for a little while because I was like, I don't know. I don't understand this. I don't know it. But one church had already been planted by the time I got there. There was an embedded church, a planter who planted in Woodstock. And he headed out about a year and a half after I got there.
Okay.
And so I just had to learn that. Like, I'm meeting people and they're like, oh yeah, we're on the core team of,
we're going to be leaving soon.
Yeah. And I was like, wait, I don't know how do we interact? Like what? And so I'm having to celebrate this thing that I'm still learning how to own. And that was a great just faith journey for me of like, whoa, this is weird. And then just got it. It just clicked. And it was like, watching individuals who are committed in the core team and what God's doing in them and their family and with their kids, certainly what God's doing in the planter, and then what God's doing in the mission where he's planting them. Yeah. And the challenge, the fruit, all of it. And but he went out, and then quickly we brought in, which this is an adventure. I'm not sure it was the wisest thing, but brought in 3 embedded church planters all at the same time.
Wow.
Which turned out to be the first was, and they went out back-to-back years. So
that's amazing, actually.
Was,
I don't care what you say or how it turned out, but the fact that you had the faith to do that is admirable.
I hope it was faith. Sometimes I wonder if it was just being naive, but no, God absolutely. I mean, He sustained us. He grew us. He grew those churches, and it was beautiful.
I think that's worth pointing out. Like, there is a lot of fear out there about planting churches for existing churches because you're thinking, well, can we afford that loss? Mm-hmm. Can we afford to lose those people? Can we afford to lose that momentum? Can we afford to lose those leaders? Mm-hmm. And I love that your church and you as a leader, you were looking at it as an investment, not a loss. I
got there.
You had to have been.
Oh, well, actually, the thing, the way that the word actually was would just be mission. Like this is our mission.
Yeah.
And there's ways to kind of stick your toe in and go, we're in the game. And then God led us to jump in some ways. And so like I got there eventually, investment, but that it was a step of kind of obedience. Like and I don't know how this is going to go. And I'm much more wired to like, I want to have everything planned out and strategic. And God just kept going like smash, smash, smash. And just, this is, and it was one of them was, the first one was bread and wine. Mm-hmm. And so these two guys come from Arkansas.
Wow.
Right. And land in Portland. And they went through the school of church planting I think Fellowship Bible Church or something in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Okay.
Great school over the years that have sent teams and planters all over the world to plant. Fully funded for 5 years, land in Portland. And they have no network of their own beyond that one. And so meet a person, meet a person. There's networking, so I sit down with Duke Rivard was the lead planter. And I think you've gone over the whole lodgepole story. I think that Rick shared that.
We've been wanting to have him he's on our list of like people, even though he's not in Portland anymore.
No,
right?
I don't know where he is now, but he's helping lead Soma family of churches now.
I didn't know that.
Cool. Vanderstelt.
Right.
So different model than we had typically been doing within the Mosaic thing. So they come and land at Mosaic and embed there, go through even though they're completely assessed and funded, they were so humble that they did our church planners assessment, went through all that and stayed around for a year and then launched out and planted bread and wine. And then, so the same time they started, John Chang started with a vision to plant on the west side, which turned out to be Missio community. And then Trav was the third that ended up planting roots. And so they all came in at the same time, and they all had very different visions and journeys and timelines.
Yeah.
But each time we sent people. And that's where the investment thing comes. Is like on paper, like strategic planning wise, most churches, that just feels like a straight loss. And I'll be honest, at times it felt like a loss to Mosaic. Like there's less people in this gathering because that whole 2 rows just went with Trav to plant roots. And like, man, I kind of liked them. And man, they had some good worship voices and skills and leaders. And they were leading our recovery ministry, and there's stuff that they were taking up ministry in the life of our church. And then all of a sudden that's gone. And realizing what it's like for a person in a church to experience that versus the pastor to experience it. Because I'm wrestling with all these my ego, fighting that back down, going, well, who's going to lead this and how many people? And then to talk to a person in the church that are just so excited about who we are and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I needed to hear that. And then the people that were like, I met with so-and-so and heard the vision and no, we're staying.
Yeah.
Next person, I met with him, heard the vision. Yeah, we're going. So it's been, and then now to be 10, 12, 15 years down the road and just to go, okay, this is what the church is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And when churches aren't involved in it, what they're missing out on it's hard to convince somebody if they haven't tasted it and gone through that struggle and the sacrifice and then the blessing and so God sustained us. God provided new people.
Yeah.
We're still doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
God's providing resources. It was a stretching journey personally as a leader, but it was absolutely shaping for the church. And there are still some that look back and go, oh yeah, I don't know that we ever recovered from boom. And, a number of years later, we did a church health assessment. And that was one of the things that came out of our story was there's an exhaustion from people sending their friends. And that's legitimate, right? That's fair.
It reminds me of, you read in Acts and the tears, right? The tearing away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, looking at you said the word development really strongly earlier, and you were kind of referring to like how you came up and then what you were passionate about and what skills you thought you were bringing to this context. And it wasn't necessarily multiplication, it was development. But I mean, tell us how what connection you see there. Did you see the connection when 3 people are embedded in the church at the same time and you're starting to calculate the investment that's going to happen? Did you see that connection then of how you could bring your skills to bear on that situation of the refill?
In some ways, yeah. I think like there was, because I'm not a church planter, really. Like I've helped plant churches, but I've never been the tip of the spear that has the initial vision that starts with the first few conversations, and then I've just never done that, and that's not how I'm wired. And so it was finding ways that I could contribute to those planters and just find out what do you need and where do I fit. And there's some things that I'm not going to be able to help you with. Like you as a planter are actually further down the road in that area than I am. But here's something I can offer. Have you thought about this? Have you done this? And then, I mean, one thing was just the teaching, preaching part was like, Mosaic has always done a team teaching model. And again, wiring wise, I don't need the attention. So I've never taught more than 50% of the time. I think that's healthy in so many ways, primarily for me personally, but for the church, what they're hearing, who they're hearing from. But it also creates an opportunity to develop other voices and bring them through. And so just even in that to go like, hey, if you're a planter and you're wrestling through what kind of notoriety are you going to get and attention and love from being an effective communicator. First of all, are you an effective communicator? And who is telling you that? And who's, so let's go through that.
If you are those things, you might be, it might be so much for your ego. And
right. Yeah. And obviously that's, there's a push pull with that actually gets some churches over the hump to be sustainable. So there's some, it can look really good. Yeah. But then when it's all around one person, we all know that. But so that was one area of like, okay, how are you thinking through prepping and teaching, and what's your long-term vision for this? And how are you assessing if you're effective? And how do you bleed in values and culture? And what are you modeling about handling scripture and teach? So those are, some specific ways. And then development as a whole that's where it really got clarified for me. So I was a young enough leader when I started that I just didn't really know who I was and what I was bringing. But Paul and then another coach mentor, a guy named Terry Walling, were really helpful in helping me assess and look back on my life and go, oh, everywhere I've been, every opportunity I've had, I identify leaders quickly or potential leaders, and then work with them, and then basically probably the term we would use is mobilize or deploy, and give opportunity and send and create space for them to try stuff and to learn and even to fail. And that meshed really well with what was already in place at Mosaic. And so there was some of those values, some of those vision, but no tracks to run on. And so I came and went, let's do this. And so let's take what's already here and build it out. And so that was what became the leader and training cohort at Mosaic, and was an annual thing that volunteers of any different age, but it was mostly young adults, were serving in ministry, had a mentor, had a monthly cohort meeting, had assessments along the way, and eventually grew into a 2-year thing. And that worked well with sending these churches out was like, okay, there goes all of our good leaders. Okay, who's next? And we have, and so if we didn't have that in place, oh man, we would have, like God used that to grow and sustain. And again, I think being more wired as a pastor teacher, I can, if I'm not careful, I can default to a static view of the church rather than a movement view of the church. That it's always got to be, we have to be growing, developing. We have to be reaching new people. We have to be sending. And so if there's not that constant fluid flow, it can get static. And then when it gets static, then you're measuring attendance, giving, adding, growing.
Does the church have a mission, or does the mission have a church?
Great. Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's press in on that a little bit with like leaders. So, I mean, I think I'm hearing you say the best way to raise up leaders is to send out leaders, and a rising tide lifts all boats. And but where have you seen that? Where do you see the challenges of that? Where do you see the strengths? And
So if you can get to a place where if you're not sending, and if you don't have a vision and even a culture and a value system that is emphasizing multiplication, whether you like it or not, you're just aiming at adding. And so if there's not like a really well-developed biblical value and vision for growing individuals and families and groups and churches, then the leadership development piece actually doesn't have a lot of vibrancy to it. And so, and I'll just talk about my own experience, but my experience growing up in the church was leadership got mixed up with, I know a lot of Bible knowledge. So I've gone to a lot of classes. I've done a lot of discipleship groups even, which is a great name, but are you really growing as a follower of Jesus? But at least in my context and culture, it was knowledge. And so without the rest of the vision, then developing leaders it can get reduced into something that it's not intended to be. But if there's a multiplication vision, then that's it. You have to be developing leaders. And then you actually have something to call them to. Like calling a leader to help us be the best church ever, right where we are, just us and our name and logo and like that has a very limited shelf life. And so a leader isn't going to grow unless there's a moment where they can willing to sacrifice for something beyond their own church and themselves, for sure. And so that's what I found was when there's a vision to send and to sacrifice to do so, then you've got leaders that are like, okay, I want to play a role in this. And I don't have any guilt or shyness or lack of confidence in talking to somebody and said, hey, will you come help lead this? Will you come help teach in this 3rd, 4th grade class? Because on Sundays, we need this because this leader just went there. And maybe just for a school year, just try it out, but you're going to make a difference in their lives and they're going to hear Jesus from you and you're going to, but it fits in a bigger thing and it's not just all about us. And so even something as simple as that, somebody goes, okay, I see the bigger picture and I'm willing to contribute. But then backing it up and going, what does it actually take to help identify the potential for leadership in somebody? And that, like, I had to learn how to do that. And then, and then obviously the challenge of when somebody says, no, I don't think that's me.
I'm curious what those things would be. Like, do you have a quick list of like, oh, I look for this in somebody?
I probably should write that down sometime. One of them is willingness and availability.
Okay.
And so watching somebody just say, I'm willing to step up and serve. So that can be, you can have an extrovert or an introvert, but when they lean in and they say, okay, I'm willing to serve. So serving, I think, is being present and serving. And that's the thing is in a lot of church contexts, people can get in they envision a serving lane. So and part of it is us as leaders that we've called for people to serve without giving them a bigger vision. But they go, okay, I'm serving. So I've checked that box and I'm good. Don't rattle me. Don't call me anything more.
I'm just going to keep doing this.
I'm just going to serve.
Comfort zone.
And you've got to listen to the Spirit and be sensitive to that. But most people that are stepping up to serve in some way are pretty closely ready for something more. So I think that's one. The other one is just relational influence. Are you showing up for the people around you? Do people go to you for, and not just wisdom, but just to hang out?
Yeah.
And so to point out in a young person, here's what I see in you. Do you see the constellation of people that are around? And a lot of times they're just oblivious to it, or they think it's their personality alone or something like, and maybe it is sometimes, but a lot of times there's some kind of relational influence that they're not even aware of, to go, how are you using that?
Yeah.
Are you going to use that for Jesus? Or are you going to use that for your own brand?
That's great.
Whatever it is. But, and then to go, try this. And then so those are probably the two biggest things is, and then just to go step into something more. And so the leader and training cohort was our initial, if you served or led in some way, consider this. And it was a high bar in terms of like time and commitment and relational investment, but it wasn't a call to vocational ministry.
Yeah.
And we would say, like, our vision was we are the leader and training cohort's vision was developing the next generation of leaders to serve Jesus in the local church for their lifetime, whether that's in vocational ministry or volunteer.
Yeah.
That's great.
Everybody knew that. And then you're just celebrating wins. You're like, oh, this person stepped in. Half of our staff had gone through that, with church planners had gone through that. People who work at Portland Rescue Mission and, all sorts. So it's all different kinds of places, but we were able to start telling those stories. And then it was, okay, I think I'm ready to try that out. And,
yeah.
Huh. Did I answer the question? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. Like what you're looking for in leaders, and kind of a hunger and to serve and then the relational influence. I love that. We've seen a similar kind of program raise up at our church, and it's all the stuff you just described. I'm just sitting here going like, wow, deja vu. I mean, it's so true how you panic at a certain moment and go, well, what are we supposed to do? And then it's like, well, just look at what did the apostles do? What did the early church do? And there's just this investment in people. And if you open that up and people step into it, and it's really a great thing to see.
Well, and it is, and then what happens is it begins to shape so much, because like let's just say the typical default is to in some sense pop up whatever your church is, whatever methodology it is, but there's probably a need for serving. So then you start putting out the call to serve, and then you're always running like, oh, there's not enough, or we need 2 more, we need 3 more, we need whatever the number is, like we just need more, and you're actually aiming at the wrong thing. And so what I found is if you aim at the higher bar, the leadership bar, then you'll get people see that and hear the stories and know the commitment and the investment. And then they're willing to start down lower and go, okay, I'll serve in this way. And not that your numbers are always, you've got all your volunteers stacked and you're good to go. Not that, but it just changes the conversation quite a bit.
It gives them a huge why also.
Absolutely.
To be like, this is the bigger vision that we're going for.
Yes. Well, and that was the thing that happened internally for me, was the planting thing. I was like, how did I finally get to that investment? Was just being personally convinced of it. I was convicted. And I had, when I graduated from seminary in 99, probably, other than everything Dallas Willard has written, the most significant book in my life is The Missional Church by Dale Guter, which was written in 98. And I saw it, and this was before anybody knew the term missional. That was when it was started, that he was the one that used it, that team that wrote that book, was missiologists. And so this was before anybody was using that term, missional. And it grabbed my attention, and I bought it, but I couldn't read it because I was finishing school and I had too many assigned meetings. But that was the first book that I read when I graduated seminary. And so I'm serving at this large church and loving it in so many ways. But I read this, and I describe it as taking everything I had learned in seminary and just like went, and synced it all up together and went, this is what it's about. And what those missiologists, right, because they each take a chapter, and the subtitle of the book is, it's the missional church, a vision for the sending of the church in North America.
North America,
And I'm like, I know I'm not called to Africa. I know I'm not called to Indonesia. I'm called to here. And just ate that up. And it went, oh, okay. So it was all those early kind of embedding within me
Mhm.
a sense of sacrifice, even if I was resisting it. And not even in a context that was,
Yeah.
that's that kind of sending on mission thing. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up, we just got a few more minutes. Tell us about Western Seminary
Mhm.
and kind of your role there. And that's developing leaders as well.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's kind of new, been 3 months. And so as I was joking earlier with you guys, I can't really feel like I can speak for Western yet, because it's a very new thing that they've done. So Western has been here a long time and has a great just kind of track record and fantastic faculty and leadership. And Chuck Connery is a newer president, three-ish years.
Okay.
And as seminaries are doing across the U.S., is looking out in the future and facing a pretty steep challenges.
Yep.
In a lot of ways, certainly culturally and then financially, and even and model wise of how the seminary. And so there's, if you go way back in the history of the seminary and then compare that to now, it's just such a different send. Again, then when they started, it was only men. It's now men and women, but only men. And you kind of go away to pick your school or where you're sent denominationally, go get trained, graduate, and then you kind of, because you have a master's degree, you're kind of God's gift to whatever church will.
Well, those farmers need to hear the gospel.
Right.
Tim.
Yeah.
Come on.
So that is kind of some origins of it, but now it's very different. And so what Western is doing very, I think, strategically, prayerfully, and aggressively is finding out how can this, well-resourced and rich seminary, not rich in money, but rich in faculty and tradition, wisdom and leadership. And Western has so much to offer, is how they can come and serve the church in that way.
Yeah.
And so intentionally taking a posture of seeking to become a trusted partner of the church. And I think ideally that's what seminaries are. But one of the challenges that seminaries have is how to actually do that.
Yeah.
And is that really what they're owning? Or do they think they're the voice to teach the church? And then when that happens, seminaries, in my humble opinion, get off track. But and so Western is really trying to find, how can we partner with the church? And knowing that, like you just described, like you've developed at Westside, we did at Mosaic, I'm sure you have some way of, you're intentionally looking for and developing leaders. Churches are developing their own leaders.
Yeah.
And yet seminaries, and Western in particular, has this great resource of professors that local churches don't have. And so how can the professors come and help train the next generation of men and women who are going to lead the church? And there's a number of ways that Western's doing that. Specifically, what I get to be involved in is helping to recruit and then lead a cohort model for a master's degree. Gary Brashears has been experimenting with this for 15 years, probably, that he's been leading. He's getting close to retirement, and that's a particular degree that Gary has led all himself, which has been so instrumental in so many pastors' lives. Dan Kimball, who has winding up his time, 20 plus years of leading Vintage Faith Church in Santa Cruz, has been connected to Western for years, but for the last 3+ years has been leading a cohort model for a master's degree using Western faculty for the Bible and theology, and then Dan has been teaching the practical ministry and leadership classes. And it's a cohort model that's 3 years. Once a month, they're all physically in class together all day with professors from Western. And then another time a month is a Zoom meeting for a couple hours that everybody's connecting and sharing, praying for one another. And Dan has been leading all that, and they want to replicate that in Portland now.
Yeah.
And so that's what I get to be a part of is so right now I'm just recruiting to that and getting word out.
Amazing.
But it's
do our listeners get a discount?
Absolutely. Here's the discount. And again, this is part of Western's vision is to make it affordable. But more importantly, even affordable, is to partner with the local church. And so there's a church partnership, church matching grant that's part of it. So churches that are investing in their leaders can contribute. They can contribute as much as they want. They can pay for the whole thing, but up to 20% will be matched by Western. And so that's 40% of the cost of the degree right there. And then there's other financial aid available and payment plans and those kinds of things. So they really want to make it affordable. But what it does is it's also intended to keep the the developing leader implanted in their church,
Yeah.
in their missional context, where they are, where God's called them, not lifting them out of it and sending them somewhere, but the seminary is coming to where they are.
Super smart. What a great shift.
I'm really excited about it. And it's like it is the graduate level of what we're trying to do, kind of if you can say undergrad level in a church.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's fantastic. I do think it will be more and more of the majority of the way leaders are developed in the church. And I think
it has to be.
Yeah, there's just not it's more and more rare that a pastor, well, and again, so many, like, I think my journey was a little bit more unique, where I knew, I don't know, at 2021, I'm going to go to seminary. And I like academics and that kind of thing. So I went from 22 to 25 and did an MDiv degree in a school that was down the street, kind of a thing. So that's just more and more rare. Yeah. And so for a seminary, actually, it's the seminary mobilizing itself to meet the church where it's at, and leaders can stay where they are. And there's a mentor piece to it. So so like if somebody from Westside were to come, like, you would probably be their mentor. And so like, say if it's one of your staff that doesn't have a master's degree, you're already supervising them probably, or some. Yeah. And so there's a mentor element. There's a communal learning with other people in ministry around town. So you're talking overlap of missional context and language and that kind of thing. Yeah. And then you've got what they need, Bible and theology, and then practical ministry and leadership stuff.
It's really cool to hear you describe that, because I know, we've been involved with Multiply PDX for a long time. You're involved with it and have been for quite some time, actually. And I think all of us, and any multiplication-minded leader that I know around the city, what we're all kind of hoping for is to create some sort of ecosystem, that speaks into the flourishing of our city. Like, that's what we care about. And this seems like such a great part of it. And it's cool to see you bring your experience and giftedness to bear on that really strong lane. So really, really grateful for you.
Yeah. Well, and the ecosystem and the flourishing, and then the vision for the long term.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I think right now we have a crisis in leadership on a couple levels. One is that there's just not enough. So we just don't have enough leaders. Yeah. And then we have a crisis on the back end of leaders failing. Yeah. We probably all have a story of a leader that we know in our life. And unfortunately, we know some in Portland, right? And so, and this isn't a commercial for Western or even for a master's degree, but there's something that happens through the training of diving deeper, not just into scripture, not just into the relationships, not into theology, and really exploring what you believe and why you believe and where it comes from, all of that. But all of that does something to help deepen a leader and their soul. And the mentoring piece of somebody who's watching the condition of their soul along the way, like that, it's a season to set up for the long term. And like planters sometimes will plant and go, it's going, it's working, great. And then they stay in it, and then they hit later, a decade down or whatever it might be, and go like, I actually don't have the depth. Yeah. I don't have the reservoir, both just maturity, emotional growth and health, but then Bible knowledge and handle scripture. And then all of a sudden, not just a leader, but then churches and people in ministries. And so there is like a vision for the long term of what's needed to help leaders be healthy and stay in the game long term. And that's needed. And so I love that vision of an ecosystem, and this being a part of it that contributes to that. I absolutely believe that's true.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. It's been great having you on the podcast and hearing more about your journey and the work in Portland and Western and everything. So how can people follow up with you or get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah. Don't look to social media. Okay. I just have no.
Just don't look to social media.
Well, maybe that's in general. Don't. Yeah. Look, but if you want to look for me, you're not going to find me there. So maybe that's an apology too. I don't know. So westernseminary.edu is the website, and then there's cohorts on there. My email is in the specific degree is Master of Arts in Ministry and Leadership. So MAML. Cool. So there's a number of cohort options in different locations, but That's the new one for Portland. And then just email is probably the easiest, which is just T for Tim, Osborn for Osborn, OSBORN at westernseminary.edu.
Nice.
So
nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thanks,
man.
Tim.
It's good to hang with you guys.
Yeah, you too.
Love the space here.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
So good. So good to be with you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.